IRCC has announced two significant changes to the Startup Visa program on the 29th of April 2024. Let's take a look at what those two changes are. Number one, capping the number of applications to not more than 10 startups per designated organization. And number two, providing priority processing for entrepreneurs whose startup is supported by Canadian capital or by a business incubator that is a member of Canada's tech network. I'm Andrea Bailey from Yalla Canada, a specialist in the Startup Visa program. Let's take a look at what the announcement means for applicants and potential applicants. The stated objectives of the changes in the Startup Visa program are twofold. Number one, reduce processing times, and number two, improve quality by having designated organizations focus on their 10 best startups. Now, the real reasons, of course, are number one, to reduce processing times and backlogs. The real reason is to curb cases where designated organizations issue the letter of support with limited due diligence so as to ensure the integrity of the Startup Visa program. So what impact does the restriction of 10 startups per designated organization actually have? The first impact is, of course, on the financials, the organizational structure, and the process of the designated organization itself, since a reduction in the number of startups will directly result in a reduction of their revenues. This will certainly almost guarantee an increase in fees charged by these designated organizations, since they can only have 10 clients per year as opposed to the dozens that they might have had earlier. I would also predict that designated organizations that used to operate a rolling system of admission of new startups will now move to a cohort system where they evaluate all applications every 2 months or every quarter and then issue maybe only 2 or 3 letters of support for each cohort. For the startup founder, what does this mean? This means that the time required to receive a letter of support in hand is definitely going to increase. The other impact would be that founders would need to apply to far more designated organizations than earlier because it would be challenging to be within the 10 startups of any cohort. We foresee that there could also be some unwanted side effects to this new change, that designated organizations might not be able to offer the same level of support and attention to their startups as earlier due to a reduction in their resources. The other unwanted side effect could be that we see more non-essential founders joining teams as investors to make the costs of the program more affordable for everyone. Now, the other big announcement is related to priority processing for certain categories of startups and designated organizations. Here, I'd first like to remind viewers about a similar announcement made by the earlier Minister of Immigration a year ago, Sean Fraser, where faster processing was promised to those with support from Canada's tech network. As you may know, that announcement, along with other promises of open work permits, were never implemented and remained only an announcement. But let's give the present minister the benefit of the doubt and look closely at his promises of faster processing times. Priority processing for startups supported by venture capitals and angels. Note that while venture capital and angels do get you potential priority processing, the fact is that the actual capital is only promised by them and not actually invested into the business until the founder has received their PR. Additionally, there are significant fees associated with getting a letter of support from these entities, so you would need to budget for higher fees for this prioritization. Fees are typically substantially more than those charged by incubators. We will need to wait and see what the new fee structures and term sheets are going to be. Also, getting priority processing in any incubator who is part of Canada's tech network. The list of incubators is on the screen now, but not all of them are actually part of the SUV program. These are Canada's best accelerators that help launch startups in Canada and globally, but they typically only work with startups that already have not just a minimum viable product, but have also attained product market fit, have early clients, get good monthly recurring revenue, and have doubling revenues every quarter. if you are able to get a letter of support from one of these incubators, you are already well on your way to establishing a successful business, and PR is just a formality even without any new priority processing. The other priority processing is for Canadian capital. Note that this does not mention that Canadian capital is only from designated organizations who are VCs and angels. Until any clarifications are issued, my belief is that any capital raised in Canada will get you priority processing. For example, if you have been able to raise a grant or get funds from BDC. We know from questions asked by IRCC to founders that IRCC has always valued startups who are able to access a grant or otherwise raise funding. The other group getting priority processing is any business that reports an investment of at least 75,000 Canadian dollars. Now, every designated organization will tell you that if you aren't investing a minimum of 75,000 Canadian dollars into your own startup, you aren't genuinely trying to do business in Canada. My belief is that this level is just a clue about the minimum level of acceptable investment into a startup in the SUV program. Any startup that hasn't invested this amount is likely to struggle with IRCC unless the founders are extremely talented and are able to do a lot of tasks themselves without needing to pay external vendors. There have been some reports in the media that there is a cap on the number of startup visa applications. This is misleading. There is no reduction in the number of applications, but there is a limitation on the number of applications any one designated organization can support in a year. The total numbers for the program remain the same as declared by the government in 2023, and this was reconfirmed in the April 29th announcement yesterday, which is 2024 will see a maximum of 7,000 approvals, and each of the next 2 years will see up to 8,000 approvals per year. The target in 2024, 5,000, the maximum is 7,000. For 2025, the target is 6,000 with the maximum level being 8,000, and the same for 2026. What does this announcement mean for those who are already in the startup system? Now, if you have already received your letter of support, there is no impact on you or your startup. If anything, your processing might be quicker due to the fact that IRCC is focusing on clearing the backlog. What next? From my conversations with multiple designated organizations yesterday when the announcement was made, the belief seems to be that there are more changes coming within the next 2 to 3 months. As of now, we have no further information on what these changes might be. Overall, though, it may be challenging for founders to get a letter of support, and we need to see the cost impact on the fees for designated organizations. It is good that IRCC has shown some commitment to decreasing the processing times. Separately, I will be watching with interest how the startup ecosystem and the media response to IRCC efforts are to attract the best business talent to Canada. Of course, it also means that founders need to be sure that they are working with consultants who really understand the startup visa ecosystem and are able to provide the support that they need to succeed. This is Andrea from Yala Canada. Do like and follow this channel to stay up to date with the latest in the Canadian business immigration streams.